This is your Enhancement Talent review for WWE Raw Reunion, the family reunion show. The let's all gather around the picnic table and grab a beer and talk about the good old days show. And that is exactly what this show, in essence, was. It was based almost solely around the nonsense involving the 24/7 title, which, it was mindless fun throughout the nights, I guess, but it didn't really do anything for me. Other than that, it was a bunch of glory days, nostalgia pops for old quote-unquote legends. I'm not sure how many people that were a part of the show that you could really call legends, but there were a few in there at least. But other than that, this was a show that I felt like had one segment that was worth watching. And granted, that segment was very, very good, and I enjoyed it a lot. But one segment on a 3-hour show does not do much for me. If that were the case, if I could just know that going in, then, you could just watch the clip of that one segment on YouTube and not have to go through this whole 3-hour nonsense of a show featured around a title that is a joke. And it's meant to be a joke. Like I'm not working myself on that. It is meant to be a joke. But then when that joke of a title is the sole focus on this reunion show that was hyped up to be something so great last week, the biggest reunion in WWE history, and it was a reunion. And my biggest complaint throughout the night is just that these nostalgia acts and the short-sightedness of it. I'm sure it will pop off a good rating. More people will have watched this show than they did last week. But for those people that tuned in this week, what incentive was there to watch next week? You saw a bunch of guys paraded around that will not be on the show next week. So, for that, I question the motive of this show, and if it was indeed for any other purpose than to just get that one rating. This 1 week, this one rating. Instead of building new, we will rely on the past. And you could have used this show to try to put over some of the guys that you have on the active roster. I just didn't feel like there was any effort to do that, aside from the one segment, which we'll get to, which was done flawlessly. And that is the one good thing I will take away from the show. The Raw reunion started with John Cena, ironically. I guess that means that John Cena really is done now that he's one of the legends that we're bringing back. It's weird to see. It's just strange that Cena is not a big part of WWE going forward. It's just strange because he has been for so damn long. And whether that's a terrible thing or not, I don't know. But it is strange to see. He did get that ridiculous hair cut off, though. So at least there was that. And you know that every time John Cena's music plays, Michael Cole always has to remind us that, in his opinion, John Cena is the greatest of all time. And Michael Cole's opinion is not worth a whole lot, if you ask me. If it were measured in weights, it wouldn't even be a cruiserweight. So Cena comes out and he's gonna play hype man to this Raw reunion show. He names a bunch of people that'll be there tonight: the Stone Colds, the Ric Flairs, the Hulk Hogans, and all that. Cena says this is his home. He hypes up the show and does all that until the Usos come out. And they go, whoa, 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 whoa. That's their new thing now. I don't think that is getting over as a catchphrase as much as their other hits like the Uso Penitentiary, but nonetheless, they're trying. The Usos come out and they say that the people want to see Cena and the Usos drop some rhymes, which is what we saw Cena do when he was last on WWE TV at WrestleMania with Elias, when he came back as the Doctor of Thugonomics. So Cena tries to leave, and then the Usos make a crack about him leaving them for the movie biz, and Cena does a quote-unquote rap, making fun of the Usos for being arrested. Yes, we're our top babyface tag team. We're openly acknowledging their arrest history. So that was nice. The Usos introduced their dad, Rikishi, and all four of these men are about to dance. They're waiting for the music to hit, but instead of the Rikishi music hitting, the Revival's music hits, which we don't normally hear the Revival's music because they don't normally get entrances. I mean, they're only the Raw Tag Team Champions, but an entrance, you kind of forgot what their theme song was. We hadn't heard it in so long. And randomly with the Revival is Devon Dudley. Of course, without Bubba Ray Dudley. And Devon just looks so out of place to me. Like, Devon without Bubba. Like, what is he? It's just strange. And then the pairing with the Revival, I'm not sure what the connection is there. Unless Devon is Dash and Dawson's father, like Rikishi is to the Usos. But I don't think that was the case. Unfortunately, this would have been a cool spot for Arn Anderson if things didn't end with him and WWE the way they did. This would have been a cool spot for Arn Anderson or Tully Blanchard or both. But I mean, Tully is now with AEW, of course. They just had him in the lead up to All Out on their YouTube channel with Shawn Spears. But had that not been the case, if the Revival could have been here with Arn and Tully for this match against the Usos and Rikishi on the outside, then that would have been a cool moment. Especially for the Revival, who have based a lot of their stuff on the old school teams like Arn and Tully. So that would have been nice, but not to be for multiple reasons. The Revival go to the ring for an apparent match with the Usos. Go to commercial, come back, Booker T's music hits, and he will join commentary. And that was an ongoing thread throughout the night. That was another thing. We just had to fit as much legend nostalgia into this show that we could. So the spots that they couldn't find someone for, they would just put them on commentary. So he joins back on Raw commentary. There was no references to any street fights between Corey Graves and Booker T this time. And by the time we come back, John Cena is also gone to the back. He disappeared. This match was unneeded for me. We've seen this multiple times over the past few weeks, including the pay-per-view match just 2 weeks ago where the Revival beat the Usos. So, being 50-50, you know that the Usos have to get their win back. And that maybe we're going to set up for another tag team match with the Usos and the Revival. So they go to commercial during this match, and they surprisingly did the split screen between the in-ring action and the commercial, which was the first time we've seen that on Raw. It's been a staple on SmackDown since they moved to live a few years ago. But this is the first time we've seen it on Raw, and it was also the only time we saw it on Raw, if I'm not mistaken. And it was just for the one commercial, the one Burger King commercial, and that was it. So I'm not sure if the split screen ad break is going to be a thing of the future for Raw. It didn't appear so. It just might be a certain sponsorship that they might do for a certain advertiser on certain points. But other than that, they didn't do it again, and it was only that one commercial. It wasn't a full commercial break they went through. Devon and Rikishi get in an argument on the outside, and this distracts Scott Dawson enough to get distracted and yell at Rikishi, to then turn around into a super kick and then a splash for the win for the Usos. And surprisingly, there were no stink faces handed out. I thought for sure that one or both of the members of the Revival were going to get a stink face tonight. And I can't say I'm disappointed that it didn't happen, because I was kind of dreading it happen. I was just thinking, here we go again. Last time we had Raw 25, where DX, NWO just completely buried the Revival. I thought for sure that this time the Revival would be buried in Rikishi's ass, but that was not to be this time. They still lost, but at least they kept some humility. There was a backstage segment with Caitlyn, Alicia Fox, Tori Wilson, and Santino Marella. And they do some comedy stuff with Santino's Cobra. They joke about his sister. Never forgets the WrestleMania 25 Women's Battle Royal to crown Miss WrestleMania that a man won. So, Drew McIntyre walks in, and he spoke for me, and I hope you, when he just scoffed at this, said, "Legends," and then shook his head and walked on. That's how I felt watching this whole show. Legends. Legends? Are you kidding me? Legends? Santino Marella? Tori Wilson? Alicia Fox? Legends? Get out of here. They had an interview with R-Truth, which they recapped in a video package, the stuff he did at Comic-Con, which was funny. I mean, the stuff with Tim disguised as a penguin and Drake Maverick dressed as, I believe, a banana, trying to pin this man for a phony title. It at least was funny. So Renee comes in, and Renee being Drake's wife, not Renee Young on commentary. I'm surprised, to go on a bit of a sidebar, I'm surprised with the goofiness that R-Truth normally does with names, like calling Drake Maverick Hornswoggle and how he called everyone Carmella, like when he called Maurice other Carmella or whatever. That with Renee being the name of Drake's wife, that they haven't had R-Truth get her confused to be Renee Young, and just like say, aren't you supposed to be on commentary or something like that? I'm surprised they haven't went there. So Renee comes in and she distracts Truth by talking about how he ruined her marriage and her honeymoon and her consummation. And this distracts Truth enough for Drake to come in, get a roll-up, the schoolboy pin, the staple of the 24/7 division, and pin R-Truth to become the new 24/7 champion. And that would far from be the last title change of this 24/7 11 TV European Championship. The funniest part of this segment, though, came because after this happens, and Maverick runs off, and Truth and Carmella run after him, Charlie Caruso is just stood there with this fake shocked look on her face, and she has to just hold that face until she gets the cue to move to what they were going to do next. So, and WWE does this all the time with their interviewers, where they just have the camera linger on them, and they have to try not to look awkward. And in this case, Charlie just had an over-the-top shocked expression on her face. And that would lead to the Godfather coming in. And they do the whole Ho Train thing, except the Godfather didn't actually say Ho Train. He let the crowd fill in the blank for him. And there was no Ho Train, though. There was only a Charlie Caruso train. Which, if that is a train, then all aboard, and I'm in for this. So, Godfather and Charlie do some lame dancing, and that was it. Drew McIntyre versus Cedric Alexander was supposed to happen here. Drew attacked Cedric during his entrance. Cedric had a brief comeback. He did a moonsault on McIntyre to the outside, but Drew would end up getting the upper hand, and he would end up laying out Cedric with a reverse Alabama slam, with Cedric hitting face first on the apron. I was totally ready to hate this, because exactly what I was expecting to happen. And you can't blame me for thinking that this would happen, given who we're talking about. But last week, we saw a 2 to 3 minute match between Cedric and Drew McIntyre, and Cedric got the surprise roll-up win, right? So this week, naturally, what I thought was going to happen is that McIntyre would then get a 3-minute win against Cedric. So I will give them credit. That is not what they did, at least. So McIntyre still is yet to get his full revenge in the form of a match. I'm not sure, like, if that's where they're going for SummerSlam. It would seem that way, that it'll be Drew versus Cedric Alexander, which, I mean, I'm a big Cedric Alexander fan. I think he is a phenomenal talent. And for that matter, I'm a big fan of Drew McIntyre too. And I think that Drew should be being elevated to the main event scene right now. But alas, we are in a feud with Cedric Alexander, which we'll see. I mean, in the end, Drew will obviously come out on top on this feud. He'll get his revenge. He'll get his win back, and that'll be it. And then it'll just be that sort of thing. Like, what did it do for either guy? Cedric got one win, but did it do anything to really elevate him? And then Drew beating someone who, for one, losing to someone once that hasn't even been on TV since he moved over to Raw, hardly. And I think the only time he was really on TV, he lost to Cesaro in his debut. That was the big debut they had for Cedric Alexander on Raw. But what does it do for McIntyre to lose a match to that guy and then beat that guy later? It doesn't elevate him. It just keeps him exactly where he is. So, I don't know. I just don't really see it going anywhere, which, I mean, I liked the start of this with, other than the major misstep of the illogical booking of the Cedric Alexander as Gary the Goat Garbitz, which would have been great if, he, won. And conveniently, they just expect us to ignore that Cedric was laid out with a Claymore and pinned by Shane McMahon in that match. That's the part that they want us to ignore. Cedric got one over on Drew and Shane, dressing as a janitor or a garbage guy or whatever it was. It was a janitor, I think. Nonetheless, going forward, Maverick goes to try to get his stuff from the locker room. Big mistake. You should have just left your stuff, left your bag, left your phone, and just hightailed it out of there. But he tries to get his stuff, and then he opens his bag to realize that there are worms infested in his bag. Which, in comes the Boogeyman. He scares Drake Maverick enough to where Maverick backpedals away from him, trips and falls, and then, out of nowhere, Pat Patterson enters. And he kicks Drake while he's down, he kicks him on the floor, and Pat does not even... I can't really expect him to drop down and give a pin to Drake Maverick, but he just puts his foot on Maverick's chest, and I guess somehow these kicks from Patterson to down Drake Maverick must have knocked him unconscious, that he couldn't even slightly lift his shoulder up. But Pat Patterson pins Drake Maverick and wins the 24/7 championship. Pat Patterson. That Pat Patterson. I mean, he adds to a historic career run of titles, adding this 24/7 championship. So, congrats to Pat. Christian comes out for commentary, and that was all they had Christian for. And the match that he commentated was a Viking Raiders squash match. What's the point? What is the point of flying these guys out, paying them who knows how much money, to then have them sit at the commentary desk and call a 2-minute match, and that's it? What's the point? Lillian Garcia did the introductions. She introduces the Viking Raiders match, which means we are going to get another verbatim read of the Viking Raiders shrink screen promo. They debuted this last week. And granted, this one was nowhere near as hilarious as my reading of last week's Viking Raiders promo. And if you missed that, you can check out my Raw review from last week. But to read this promo for verbatim, what are the names? Eric and Ivar, not Hanson and Rowe. The Viking Raiders are ready to ransack, slaughter, and annihilate any competition. That includes Hawkins and Ryder. It's too late to run. The raid is here. This is the verbiage that these men are given to spew out of their mouths as promo. Now, this was nowhere near the ridiculousness of the words that were used in last week's promo, because they are treating this as if we are supposed to believe that these two men are literal Vikings, like they were pulled out of a time warp and just put into a wrestling ring. So we have the Viking Raiders versus Hawkins and Ryder. I'll give you one guess on how this match ended. The Raiders, they go on the defensive briefly as Hawkins and Ryder have a brief bit of offense, but still another squash match for the Viking Raiders. They win with their finishing move, the Viking Experience. And yeah, it is now towards the end of July. The Viking Raiders debuted after WrestleMania. And they have done nothing but have squash matches. It is so clear that this company does not care about building up a tag team division. And they on a 3-hour show, they only have so much time to give to their tag team wrestling. Just ask Dash and Dawson over the past several years how that's went for them on the main roster, as far as getting a chance to actually show what they can do in the ring. And the Raiders are, I hate calling them the Raiders, but the Viking Raiders, whatever. But they're both talented. We've seen it in NXT. They had a name that worked, the War Raiders, which when they first got called up, the war chants from the crowd still rung through. And every week it dwindled down a little further because they're not the War Raiders. So that chance can't be given a chance to prosper and have them be over like they were in NXT. We have a backstage bit with Mike Kanellis' daily neutering session. Mike and Maria. Mike is backstage chatting among the legends in the background. Maria comes in and bitches at Mike for not putting lotion on her stomach so that she doesn't get stretch marks, because that would be horrific for her modeling career. And how will they be able to provide for their family without Maria's modeling career? Because she says that she is the bread maker of the family. And Ron Simmons comes in. He grabs Jimmy Hart's megaphone and says, "Damn. Damn indeed." We'll see how much lower they can bury Mike Kanellis into the earth. I'm still waiting for the live neutering of Mike Kanellis, or maybe the live pegging of Mike Kanellis might come soon, with Maria at the helm. We get another 24/7 title nonsense with Gerald Briscoe beating Pat Patterson for the 24/7 title. Old Jerry. At least this wasn't what was it that Briscoe and Patterson did? Was it a nightgown match, or was it like a tuxedo match or something ridiculous? At least this wasn't that. So then Kelly comes in. She somehow forces Briscoe to collapse, and she pins him, and she becomes the first ever female holder of the 24/7 title. At least she didn't have to run the ropes tonight, because everything she did was backstage. because we all know how great Kelly is at running the ropes or doing anything in a wrestling ring besides showing off her tits. Samoa Joe comes out to cut one of his super duper intimidating promos, which will lead to a loss, as all of his promos do. But Joe spoke for all of us. He said that shows like this are a plague to WWE. And Joe mentions the Rikishi and the Usos thing from earlier. And he doesn't even say anything disparaging about Rikishi, really. But just the mere mention of Rikishi forced Roman Reigns' music to hit. And Roman Reigns must have taken after his partner, The Undertaker, from Extreme Rules, because he took his sweet time with this entrance. Roman says if Joe has anything to say about his family, he can say it to his face. And Joe says that he already did say something about Roman's family. And they get in each other's face. And Roman says, "We're both from the same island. You know how this ends." Yes, the great island of Pensacola, Florida. Or wherever Joe is from, somewhere in California. Those great islands there. So, Joe attacks Roman, tries to get a cheap shot in. Joe throws him around for what felt like forever, just throwing this man pillar to post, until eventually Roman fends him off with a Superman punch. Joe would tease having a match with Roman, but then leave. And then Roman says that not all Samoans are cowards, which goads Joe into taking the match. So we get the ever illustrious rematch from that great Backlash pay-per-view, which was critically acclaimed as one of the worst pay-per-views in WWE history, which the main event of that show was Samoa Joe versus a Samoan named Joe. That match featured a 20-minute chinlock, if I recall correctly. Fans bolted for the exits during that match. So, Roman, during this match, he is going to go for his Superman dive to the outside, where he does the dive over the top rope. Normally, he does it into like 15 people that all catch him. But Joe tries to cut him off in the ring, but Roman adjusts and hits a spear for the clean win over the doormat known as Samoa Joe. Anytime that Michael Cole or Tom Phillips or Corey Graves try to inform you of how threatening Samoa Joe is and how he's laid a wake of bodies behind him and how imposing of a figure he is and whatever else they want to spew on commentary, just remember that every time he will lose. And it's just a shame, because Joe, in my opinion, is the best promo in this company today. As far as intensity and just being able to make the content of his words feel real. Joe is the absolute best in WWE right now. But the problem is that he's under the Bray Wyatt syndrome, and not the current Bray Wyatt, the 2017-2018 Bray Wyatt, that by the time, like, he would cut all these ominous, spooky promos, but in the end he would lose. So there was no reason to invest your time in anything he had to say. Samoa Joe has fallen under the same category. We have another pointless segment, except this one didn't involve any legends, quote unquote. I mean, it involves Seth Rollins, who I guess is a legend in his own mind because he has money. His bank account is legendary. We have Seth Rollins on Miz TV. He claims that Brock Lesnar is a Seth Rollins wannabe, which I'm not sure if the comparison he's trying to draw is that Brock cashed in on him the same way Rollins cashed in on Brock, if maybe that's what he's implying, but he never really gave a full explanation of why Brock Lesnar is a Seth Rollins wannabe. So Paul Heyman interrupts, and he comes to the ramp, and Rollins just tells him that that Heyman has 5 seconds to disappear and go to the back before he comes up there and stomps his head into the ground. And so Heyman runs away like a frightened teenage girl. And that was pretty much it. Like, there was not much content to anything Heyman said. It wasn't long before Rollins told him to take a hike. And then Rollins just says that he's going to beat Lesnar for the title. That was it. That was this segment. And I don't know if it's because of the way that Seth Rollins has been acting in interviews and on Twitter and all that, but I just can't get into him as a babyface at this point. And maybe that's on me. Maybe I'm working myself there, but I just can't. I can't really get into him. And at this point, it's just strange that he's taken such a stance to be like he's being a heel out of character, but then wants to be a babyface in character. So I feel like he's going to feel the effect of that too, because I don't feel like I'm the only one that feels that way about Rollins at this point. And I like it's not even anything personally against Rollins. I like Rollins. I think he's one of the top 2 with him and AJ, I would say, that are the best overall performers on the WWE roster. But I don't know. I mean, it's a combination of that and then the lackluster title run he had with nothing but Baron Corbin matches. There's just not a lot to get into at this point. And I just need to see more fire. More of a fiery babyface, which I thought he did a good job of last week. It just didn't feel the same this time, I guess. But we'll see. Lesnar versus Rollins at SummerSlam. They still have a few weeks to pique the interest for that, and we'll see if Rollins can reclaim the Universal title. We had another 24/7 segment. And this featured, I believe it was Melina, Candice Michelle, and someone else. Maybe it was Jillian Hall or something. I don't know. But Melina, who's... I don't even know the last time we've seen Melina on WWE TV. She's been on the same do not call list that Victoria's been on for all these years. So, at least Melina is back in a working relationship with WWE, I guess. But Melina says that she just finished school, I think she called it, or training or whatever. And they asked her what she was training for. And she reveals that she is a certified referee. And so Candice Michelle takes advantage of this, and she pins Kelly, who comes by. Kelly wanted to celebrate that she was the 24/7 champion. And then, after Candice pins Kelly, Alundra Blaze comes over. She puts Candice in a headlock, I think, and Candice taps out. So now Alundra Blaze is the new 24/7 champion. And she looked more like she was supposed to be a part of Right to Censor, the way she was dressed. It was very odd. Like I thought it was gonna be one of the Right to Censor people, but it was Alundra Blaze, and that would lead to something later. But after that, it was Sami Zayn versus Rey Mysterio, which I didn't recap the segment that set it up, but Zayn was disrespecting the quote-unquote legends, which led Rey Mysterio to confront him, and then Kurt Angle to come in the same fashion that he would in his lame GM run. He told them if they have a problem, they can settle it in the ring. Jonathan Coachman was on guest commentary for this match, which instantly made it at least 3.5 times worse. Which Graves mentioned how Renee took Coach's job, which at least made me laugh. Sammy tries to leave the match, take a hike, when Rob Van Dam's music hits, followed by Sergeant Slaughter, Hurricane Helms, and Kurt Angle. The real A-team there of characters. Sergeant Slaughter and Hurricane Helms together. That's something. Sammy goes back in the ring, being fended off by the retirement home, and he is hit by a 619 for the Rey Mysterio win. We had a Street Profits segment, and this was probably the funniest one of these they've done yet. And Montez Ford and Dawkins, like they're so incredibly charismatic, but the last few weeks all they've been given is just hype man for the shows. This time they actually had some more stuff to it, as Ford is walking around and he's looking for Dawkins, and he eventually finds Dawkins putting eye drops in his eyes. But I mean, where else would you put eye drops, I guess? And when Ford asked him what he was doing, Dawkins says that he was rolling beers with RVD, which you could tell what he was about to say, but he substituted it for rolling beers with Rob Van Dam. Hopefully, they don't give Dawkins a random drug test going forward, so he doesn't have to fail the wellness policy. Alundra Blaze comes out, and you saw it coming a mile away when she won this title. She heads to the commentary desk, and she teases to throw it in. She's about to throw it in the trash. It would have been funnier if Eric Bischoff was out there for this segment. But before she is able to throw this title in the garbage where it belongs, the $1 Million Man comes out and offers to buy the title from Alundra. And I couldn't tell how much money he gave her, but however much it was, he overpaid. That title isn't worth its weight in pennies, let alone whatever $100 he gave Alundra. But Alundra hands over the 24/7 title to the $1 Million Man, which we at least got a Ted DiBiase laugh out of this. And if that doesn't make it worth it, then I don't know what does. Jerry Lawler is out on commentary for the next match on AJ Styles versus Seth Rollins. And we just can't do anything right, man. Like, this was the only match on the show where you hype up a match. And I figured this was going to be the main event, which it wasn't. But with AJ Styles versus Seth Rollins being a rematch of a Universal title match a few months ago, and AJ being the United States champion, and Seth being the challenger for the Universal title, this was a match that could have made this show a lot better if we just had a 25-minute match between Rollins and AJ. And then I get the point, like, you book yourself in a corner there because you can't beat Rollins or AJ going into SummerSlam. AJ just won the United States title, and Seth Rollins is facing Brock Lesnar for the Universal title. So, I mean, there's a solution there where you can just put AJ Styles or Seth Rollins in a match against someone they can beat and still have a good match against. But it's just disappointing that they advertised this match and they kept it as the graphic that they'd hype the rest of the show for, that you got to stay tuned for this. And it ends up being probably 5 minutes of actual wrestling. So AJ knocks Rollins to the floor after a distraction by Carl Anderson. And the three of them stare down Rollins and are about to probably go and beat down on him. But then out come Triple H and Shawn Michaels to back them off. And this leads to a commercial, which tells us that that whole thing was done just so we did not have wrestling on the commercials. They come back and the match is back in the ring. Rollins goes for a stomp, but Gallows and Anderson trip him and jump in and pounce on Rollins for the disqualification. DX come in and a stare down with the club occurs. AJ tries to do a two sweets. DX, originally they go along, they put up the two sweets, but then they give them a suckets. They clear the ring, and the club goes to get chairs. They're going to come back in, but that's when Road Dogg's music hits. He comes down with Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, and the 1-2-3 Kid, as they were calling him this time. And they called the other two Ramon and Diesel as well. And Road Dogg says that with China's Spirit being there, there's 7 here, before saying, "Oh crap, I forgot about Billy." Which, at least they mention his name. He's not blacklisted. The club, of course, back off, and Road Dogg lets Seth do the suck it line. And my takeaway from this is that AJ Styles still wants a match with Shawn Michaels. You remember, it was probably last year, I think 2018, the Royal Rumble, where the picture was floated around that AJ shared on Twitter of him facing Shawn Michaels at the Royal Rumble. It was clear because AJ insisted on just talking to Shawn Michaels from the outside of the ring and threatening to come down to NXT and find him there. Is it going to happen? Probably not. But, I mean, at this point, Michaels had the one match that already ruins the best retirement in pro wrestling. He's already soiled it, so if you're going to soil it, you might as well give us something good out of it. And Shawn Michaels versus AJ Styles is something that I will always be a part of. I would definitely take part of that at this point, now that Shawn Michaels has already broken his retirement anyway. Drake Maverick comes in and he ambushes Ted DiBiase in his limo. DiBiase went to leave in his limo. He closes the door, and we just hear a bunch of thud noises. And then Maverick came out with the 24/7 title for all of the job squad that have nothing better to do but chase after this meaningless title. Run after him. Hilariously, though, and I didn't catch this at first, but EC3 is at the head of this line with an electric drill in his hand, chasing after Drake Maverick. What the hell is he planning on doing to this man to win the 24/7 title? A drill. And now we get to what I teased earlier. That's what you call it in the broadcasting business, a tease. Mick Foley comes out to reminisce on Raw's past, and they were gonna play a video package of the best moment for Mick Foley on Raw, which was when he won the WWF title on Raw. But then, just like we saw last week with Finn Balor, first that Titantron fades away. It fades to black. Then the lights gradually go out, and out comes the Fiend, Bray Wyatt. They do the flickering lights, and they get a good close-up of him in the excellently designed mask. And he comes in, and he puts down Mick Foley, not with a Sister Abigail. I mean, God, no. We know Mick Foley's not going to take a Sister Abigail, as he shouldn't. He instead puts Foley down with a mandible claw. And I wouldn't mind if Bray uses the mandible claw going forward, just as something that he takes away from Foley after this. But this was the only segment of the show that I can honestly tell you that I fully enjoyed. The whole concept of it and everything. Because this is what these legend appearances should be used for, is to give the rub to someone that will actually be on TV next week. And so Bray Wyatt coming in for the second week in a row as the Fiend, and this time laying waste to a legend with such highly regarded status as Mick Foley. And if you noticed, it actually got heat. People booed Bray Wyatt for this, which is great, because Mick Foley is such a beloved character that Bray Wyatt putting him down with his own move, the mandible claw that he made famous, it got heat. People didn't like it, which is how they are supposed to feel. You can't do this Fiend character and have it be a cool thing that people cheer for. It needs to be a horror movie-esque thing. And they're continuing doing great stuff with that, and I hope they continue it going forward. You know, my suggestion a few weeks ago was to just have Bray Wyatt debut and beat Brock Lesnar for the title at SummerSlam. But I'm going to amend it now and say that we hold that match off until WrestleMania. Brock can have another reign of terror, which I know nobody wants to hear, including me, but let's be real. What did Seth Rollins having the Universal title do for Monday Night Raw? It didn't make it any better. It didn't do anything for us. He had the one good match with AJ, that was it. So it didn't do anything for us. So you can have Brock have another reign of terror as long as it ends the right way. with Brock dropping the title to the new face of fear, the new beast, the new reigning, defending, undisputed Universal Champion, the Fiend, Bray Wyatt. And you can just build both of them up, give them all big wins. Brock beats Seth Rollins, Bray Wyatt beats whoever you put him against, and they meet at the end in a collision course at WrestleMania, where both of them are protected, both of them are presented as top guys in the company, and then in the end, the old 40-year-old beast puts over cleanly the new beast, Bray Wyatt. And that is all wishful thinking, because anytime Brock Lesnar loses a match now, it has to be because of some sort of nefarious means. Even when Roman Reigns beat him, you could argue it was because of the distraction of Braun Strowman trying to cash in his contract. The only really clean win the only clean loss, rather, that Brock has suffered was that Survivor Series match to Goldberg. And even that, they had a defense for it. That Brock came in overconfident, and Goldberg came in with a flurry out of nowhere and caught Brock off guard and put him away in a minute and change. And ever since Brock Lesnar beat The Undertaker at WrestleMania, I believe it's only 4 matches he's lost altogether. And none of them were really clean as a sheet. The Undertaker rematch at Survivor Series, I believe, was the one where Undertaker tapped out, but the bell wasn't called for, and then Undertaker ended up winning. Then you have the match with Goldberg. Then you have the match with Reigns, which I just talked about at SummerSlam that year. And then the match with Rollins, which Rollins won with a low blow. And I think that's another part of Rollins' reign that I don't buy into, is that he didn't beat Brock clean. Anyway, enough about that. That's all fantasy booking that will likely not happen because it's WWE. We have a moment of bliss, which is the guest appearance is Becky Lynch. Hilariously, earlier in the day, Sports Illustrated on Twitter would post breaking news that Becky Lynch would be on a moment of bliss. That is what qualifies as breaking news. Sports Illustrated just feed the agenda of whatever WWE wants them to do, really. But nonetheless, I mean, it's just stuff that they just give them to try to drum up some sort of excitement for their shows. But a moment of bliss, Alexa and Nikki Cross, who are still friends, no cross words between them, no pun intended. And Becky Lynch comes out. It takes an entire 2 seconds into Becky's speech before Natalya comes out. And Natty comes out. She just says, say it to my face, whatever you're going to say. Becky says that the title she holds represents the scalp of Natalya's MMA pal, Ronda Rousey, who I thought wasn't her friend now. If I'm not mistaken, didn't, when Ronda turned heel, Natty said that they weren't friends anymore, but now they're referenced here as just still being friends. I mean, I don't doubt it. Natalya, all she has is her damn friends. That's the only thing that even gets her mentioned on TV, is being someone's friend. But other than that, they end up getting in a pull-apart brawl after Becky said that she'll embarrass Natty in her home country, and then we got a pull-apart brawl, and I'm not sure what the point of this was, especially the part of just having Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross out there when they recapped the stuff from the Fatal 4-Way last week, and they just acted like it wasn't Alexa Bliss that Natalya beat to get this spot. Just no mention of that at all. Alexa is just meant to play dumb as the quote-unquote interviewer in this segment. Yeah, a moment of bliss continues to be the worst television on TV. The worst television on TV. That doesn't make sense. That's a bit redundant. The worst segment on TV when it is aired. Drake Maverick and Renee try to get away after they have won their 24/7 title back. Drake has, at least. Because the whole thing going into this was that Renee was finally on board with Drake winning the 24/7 title. She even said that when Drake wins it back, then they will consummate their marriage because Drake will have the confidence he needs. They try to get away in a limo, but R-Truth comes in to roll up Drake Maverick, but Renee holds on to him to keep Drake on his feet. But in comes Carmella, who super kicks Drake. 1, 2, 3. Truth gets the title. He jumps in the limo that Renee is still in, and it drives off. And Drake is left standing out there with Carmella as Drake is crying about, my baby, my baby. And then he looks up at Carmella and says, Renee. And then he realizes it's Carmella. And then he says, my wife. So he's lost his... Truth took his title and his wife. Maybe Truth will consummate the marriage for Drake. We'll see if that's the next shocking turn in this feud, that Truth ends up stealing the girl and the title. That'd be something. Braun Strowman beat a jobber. I don't know his name. There was some sort of joke where it was Randy Rowe, but Graves called him Randy Rhodes, which I see that some people on Twitter thought that he said Brandy Rhodes. But it didn't seem like that was supposed to be an AEW shot. But Strowman beat a jobber. There was 0 point in this. Strowman even said, don't blink because this ain't going to last long. Before tossing this poor man across the ring and eventually beating him. So the main event is set to be a toast to Raw. I guess if you want to be technical, the main event match was Braun Strowman beating that jobber. But the names that are hyped up to be in this segment, I believe, are Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold, Ric Flair, and Shawn Michaels, I think, was the fourth one. And so Ric Flair, too, was one of the big ones that they were hyping up. Only for Ric Flair to come out and never be given a microphone or a chance to speak. So Flair came out, as do all the legends, the quote-unquote legends, that file behind him, and they all stand in a line at the ramp or the stage or whatever. Hulk Hogan's music hits. Hulk Hogan does a Hulk Hogan promo. Stone Cold comes out. He gets his beer, and he does his best to kill the last 10 minutes that were left in the airtime. And he does so by giving heartfelt thank yous to every one of the legends on the stage that that have given so much to the industry and all the travel. And he shouts out like Ron Simmons and Hulk Hogan. and Ric Flair, and he thanks the audience in attendance and everyone watching at home. He does the whole thank you, and it was, I don't want to downplay it because it was very heartfelt from Austin, and so I don't want to downplay that or shit on Steve, because Steve did a great job here. But the issue for me was just that there was nothing of this show. And then to do like this curtain call-esque sort of thing, just, it didn't really sit right to me, even though I love Steve, but there was nothing to him appearing just to say thank you. And that's what was used to hook the viewers into staying, was seeing Stone Cold, Hulk Hogan, and Ric Flair later on in the night. And this was it. This is why at the beginning of this show, I just said that this was a cheap pop, a nostalgia act show where everyone gathers around the picnic table, the family reunion, the oddest family reunion, and we're just looking at old albums and things that make us feel nostalgic. But that's all there was to it. There was no substance to it. There was no reason. There was no incentive to watch next week. There were few things that really put over the talents that are on the active roster, and it was more just, hey, here's this guy. Oh, hey, here's this one. And, oh, remember this one. And that was all there was to it, to me. And, like I said, the 24/7 stuff, it was mindless fun. It was childlike brain fun. Which, don't get me wrong, I can get into that sort of humor. But when it's the focal point of the entire show, and there's nothing else to complement it, nothing else to break up the comedy and give us something serious, something that we can look forward to. There wasn't a lot of that. It was only the Bray Wyatt segment that delivered for me. And other than that, I just felt like this was a short-sighted event. It will pop a rating this week, and good on them. They'll get 2.8 instead of 2.4. I don't know. That I don't stalk the ratings like everyone does. I care about the products that they are putting forward and the interest that it would give anyone new that watches this show. And if you had never watched WWE before and you watch this week, you wouldn't be given a reason to watch next week. And even if you are one of the lapsed fans that comes in to watch one of these reunion shows, what will get you to watch next week? You got your Stone Cold, you got your Hulk Hogan, you got all the things that you wanted out of this show, but it didn't give you a reason to want to stay. And that is where it falls flat to me. Similar to the Raw 25 show that they did last year. There just wasn't an incentive to stick around. But I'd say I've went long enough on this Raw reunion show. Until the next one they do, as soon as they feel they need to cater to the past audience to get more viewership, I'm sure we'll randomly get another sort of reunion show a few years from now. Maybe when they do the 1500th episode of Raw, that'll be like a milestone that they can pull out the old school guys for that. But I'm out of here. Subscribe to the channel, do all that YouTube stuff, like, comments, check out the full regular podcasts me and Chris Kirby do on Spreaker, iTunes, Google Play, all those podcast places. Stay tuned. I'll have my SmackDown review tomorrow. But until then, take care.